August 1939. A fuse gets lit in a quiet room in Berlin, and in 30 days, the entire world catches fire. No single gunshot, no single order. A chain reaction, decisions, miscalculations, alliances snapping taut like tripwires. This is the 30-day sequence that flipped the world. Let's walk through every link. By the summer of 1939, Europe had already spent a decade rearming. The question wasn't whether the continent was dangerous, it was who would blink. The alliance landscape looked like this. Britain and France had mutual defense guarantees, but they were war-weary after the last conflict and desperate to avoid another. Germany, under Hitler, had spent 6 years rebuilding its military and reclaiming territory through a strategy of calculated bluff. And the Soviet Union, the giant to the east, had been courted by both sides and trusted by neither. Each previous German move, the Rhineland in 1936, Austria in 1938, the Sudetenland later that year, had been met with protests and concessions. The pattern had a name: appeasement, and it had taught Berlin one dangerous lesson: push, and the West will give ground. That assumption was about to be tested hard. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is signed. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union agreed to non-aggression. A secret protocol divides Eastern Europe between them. This is the moment the chessboard tilts. Britain and France had been in negotiations with Moscow all summer, hoping to build a three-way defensive wall against German expansion. Stalin, calculating that the Western powers were slow and unreliable, chose a different deal. When the pact was announced, the reaction across Europe was shock. For Hitler, this was the green light. A two-front war, the nightmare that had destroyed Germany in 1914, was no longer a risk. Poland, which Germany had been pressuring for months over the Danzig corridor, was now surrounded. For Poland, the clock was now running. German forces cross into Poland at dawn. The invasion begins, simultaneously by land, sea, and air. Within hours, Warsaw is under bombardment. Polish cities, roads, and rail lines are targeted. The speed and scale are unlike anything seen before. This isn't a border skirmish, it is a full-scale war. The 48 hours after September 1st were the last window. Britain and France had a treaty obligation to Poland, but would they honor it? London sent an ultimatum to Berlin: withdraw from Poland or Britain would consider itself at war. Paris followed. Berlin did not reply with any withdrawal. Berlin replied with silence. Britain declares war on Germany at 11 a.m. France follows at 5 p.m. The regional conflict becomes a European war. Why did diplomacy fail? Each side wanted different things and feared different things. Germany wanted a quick, contained Polish campaign. It expected the West to protest loudly and then accept the outcome, as they had in Munich a year earlier. Britain and France feared another Munich would destroy their credibility permanently. They had given Poland a guarantee. If they abandoned it, every remaining alliance in Europe would be meaningless. Poland expected its allies to open a Western front immediately, relieving the pressure. That relief would not come in time. Once Britain and France declared war, the alliance system that everyone had built and everyone hoped they'd never need began pulling nations in like a current. Within hours of the British declaration, the Dominions were consulted. The British Empire was not monolithic. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa each had their own parliaments. Australia and New Zealand declare war immediately. Canada declares war on September 10th. South Africa follows after a close parliamentary vote. In 1 week, a border conflict in Eastern Europe had become a war with combatants on 6 continents. And then the Soviet side of the Molotov-Ribbentrop deal activated. Soviet forces invade Poland from the east in accordance with the secret protocol of the August Pact. Poland is now fighting on two fronts simultaneously. Poland's military command, already stretched beyond its limits, recognized the end had come. The government evacuated to Romania. Organized resistance continued for weeks, but the strategic outcome was sealed. In less than 3 weeks, a nation of 35 million people had been conquered by two of the largest armies in the world, operating in secret coordination. So how did everyone get it so wrong? In 1939, every major decision-maker was operating on assumptions that turned out to be false. Here are the 3 that matter most. Assumption 1. Hitler assumed the West would not fight for Poland. He had watched Britain and France concede at every previous confrontation, the Rhineland, Austria, the Sudetenland. His calculation was that a Polish campaign would be accepted, grudgingly, as a done deal. When Chamberlain delivered the ultimatum, Hitler reportedly asked his foreign minister, "What now?" He had not planned for a Western declaration of war. Assumption 2. Britain and France assumed a declaration would deter Germany, not just punish it. The logic in London and Paris was that a firm stance would force Berlin to pause, negotiate, or back down, as it had in previous crises. They underestimated both Hitler's commitment to Poland and Germany's military readiness. The declaration came. Germany did not stop. The West found itself at war without a clear short-term plan to fight one. Assumption 3. Stalin assumed he could stay out indefinitely while the capitalist powers exhausted themselves. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was sold internally as breathing room, time for the USSR to build strength while Germany and the West ground each other down. What Stalin miscalculated was the speed of France's collapse in 1940, which would bring German power directly to the Soviet border far faster than anyone anticipated. The buffer he bought in 1939 would last less than 2 years. 3 leaders, 3 bad assumptions, all reasonable given what each of them knew, and all catastrophically wrong. If there is a single moment when the door closes, when the 30-day chain reaction becomes irreversible, it is 11:05 a.m. on September 3, 1939. Britain's ultimatum to Germany has expired. No response has come from Berlin. In a BBC radio broadcast, Chamberlain announces that Britain is at war. He told the nation that everything he had worked for, everything he had hoped for, had crashed into ruins. His words carried the weight of a man who had tried and failed to stop what was coming. That broadcast changes the math permanently. Once Britain is at war, France follows within hours. Once France follows, the Commonwealth mobilizes. The conflict can no longer be localized. It can no longer be negotiated back to a regional dispute. From this point, the question is no longer whether there will be a world war. The question is how long it will last and how far it will spread. The answer, as the world would learn, was 6 years and every inhabited continent. Before we close, let's clear up 3 things that the popular version of this story usually gets wrong. Myth 1. Hitler wanted a world war from the start. The historical record suggests Hitler expected a short, contained campaign in Poland, not an immediate two-front conflict with Britain and France. His broader ambitions were large, but the September 1939 escalation was not the war he was planning for that year. The Western Declaration genuinely caught his leadership off balance. Myth 2. The war started because of one event. There was no single trigger like the 1914 assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. World War II in Europe grew from years of territorial accumulation, a broken appeasement strategy, and a specific week of miscalculated diplomacy. The invasion of Poland was the culminating act of a multi-year process, not a surprise from nowhere. Myth 3. The Soviet Union was just a bystander in September 1939. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and the Soviet invasion of Poland from the east on September 17th made the USSR an active participant in the partition of Poland.
The war's opening chapter was a joint German-Soviet operation, a fact that was officially denied in Soviet historiography for decades. 30 days. From a secret pact signed in Moscow, to a German invasion, to declarations of war, to a global conflict with combatants on 6 continents. 30 days for a chain reaction that would define the next 6 years of human history. The question that historians still debate: at what point was this actually inevitable, and was there ever a real moment it could have been stopped? We'll cover that in the next video, the decisions in 1938 that made 1939 possible. If you want to understand how this war was already being lost before it officially started, that episode is next.